In the first days, in the very first days, in the first nights, in the very first nights, in the first years, in the very first years, in the first days when everything needed was brought into being, in the first days when everything needed was properly nourished, when bread was baked in the shrines of the land and bread was tasted in the homes of the land, when heaven had moved away from earth and earth had separated from heaven, and the name of man was fixed. When the sky god On had carried off the heavens and the air god Enlil had carried off the earth, when the queen of the great below, Ereshkigal, was given the underworld for her domain, he set sail. The Father set sail. Enki, the god of wisdom, set sail for the Abzu. Small windstones were tossed up against him. Large hailstones were hurled up against him. Like onrushing turtles, they charged the keel of Enki's boat. The waters of the sea devoured the bow of his boat like wolves. The waters of the sea struck the stern of his boat like lions. At that time, a tree, a single tree, a hupu tree, was planted by the banks of the Euphrates. The tree was nurtured by the waters of the Euphrates. The whirling south wind arose, pulling at its roots and ripping at its branches until the waters of the Euphrates carried it away. A woman who walked in fear of the word of the sky god On, who walked in fear of the word of the air god Enlil, plucked the tree from the river and spoke, I shall bring this tree to Uruk. I shall plant this tree in my holy garden. Inanna cared for the tree with her hand. She settled the earth around the tree with her foot. She wondered, how long will it be until I have a shining throne to sit upon? How long will it be until I have a shining bed to lie upon? The years passed, 5 years, then 10 years. The tree grew thick, but its bark did not split. Then a serpent who could not be charmed made its nest in the roots of the hupu tree. The Anzu bird set his young in the branches of the tree, and the dark maid Lilitu built her home in the trunk. The young woman who loved to laugh wept. How Inanna wept, yet they would not leave her tree. As the birds began to sing at the coming of the dawn, the sun god Utu left his royal bedchamber. Inanna called to her brother Utu, saying, O Utu, in the days when the fates were decreed, when abundance overflowed in the land, when On took the heavens and Enlil the earth, when Ereshkigal was given the great below for her domain, Father Enki set sail for the Abzu, and the Abzu rose up and attacked him. At that time, a tree, a single tree, a hupu tree was planted by the banks of the Euphrates. The south wind pulled at its roots and ripped at its branches until the waters of the Euphrates carried it away. I plucked the tree from the river. I brought it to my holy garden. I tended the tree, waiting for my shining throne and bed. Then a serpent who could not be charmed made its nest in the roots of the tree. The Anzu bird set his young in the branches of the tree. In the dark maid Lilitu built her home in the trunk. I wept. How I wept, yet they would not leave my tree. Utu, the valiant warrior Utu, would not help his sister Inanna. As the birds began to sing at the coming of the second dawn, Inanna called to her brother Gilgamesh, saying, O Gilgamesh, in the days when the fates were decreed, when abundance overflowed in Sumer, when On had taken the heavens and Enlil the earth, when Ereshkigal was given the great below for her domain, Enki, the god of wisdom, Father Enki, set sail for the Abzu, and the Abzu rose up and attacked him. At that time, a tree, a single tree, a hupu tree, was planted by the banks of the Euphrates. The south wind pulled at its roots and ripped at its branches until the waters of the Euphrates carried it away. I plucked the tree from the river. I brought it to my holy garden. I tended the tree, waiting for my shining throne and bed. Then a serpent who could not be charmed made its nest in the roots of the tree. The Anzu bird set his young in the branches of the tree, and the dark maid Lilitu built her home in the trunk. I wept, how I wept, yet they would not leave my tree. Gilgamesh, the valiant warrior Gilgamesh, the hero of Uruk, stood by Inanna. Gilgamesh fastened his armor of 50 minas around his chest. The 50 minas weighed as little to him as 50 feathers. He lifted his bronze axe, the axe of the road, weighing 7 talents and 7 minas to his shoulder. He entered Inanna's holy garden. Gilgamesh struck the serpent who could not be charmed. The Anzu bird flew with his young to the mountains, and Lilitu smashed her home and fled to the wild, uninhabited places. Gilgamesh then loosened the roots of the hupu tree, and the sons of the city who accompanied him cut off the branches. From the trunk of the tree he carved a throne for his holy sister. From the trunk of the tree Gilgamesh carved a bed for Inanna. From the roots of the tree she fashioned a puku for her brother. From the crown of the tree Inanna fashioned a miku for Gilgamesh, the hero of Uruk. Salutations from space, folks. This is Gemini Brett, the astrolonaut and trickster storyteller of More Than Astrology. And this is the first chapter of a new project that I've taken on with my dear friend and magical musician, Marya Stark, who you heard playing the role of Inanna in that chapter, which was a reading from a translation of the Sumerian tablets by Diane Wolkstein and Samuel Kramer from their book, Inanna, Queen of Heaven and Earth. Now, I met Marya on Valentine's Day of 2015 at an incredible place called Wonderland in Portland. And I was there to give a talk called The 13th Flower, which is developing now into this project. And it was a tricky time down there because Bina, who this project is livicated to, had transitioned from this world when Venus was in the underworld last year. We're going to talk about that some today with a very amazing astrologer. And I heard about this man who is Adam Gainsburg first at Wonderland. Actually, I probably had heard his name a few times before I was there, but I remember I was outside with Elijah Parker, who created the animations you were watching while hearing that Inanna storytelling. And I was out kind of pointing out some of the planets and stars to him. He said, "Man, I have never seen an astrologer so committed to the sky since Adam Gainsburg." And I said, "Oh, all right, there's that name again. And this is a guy I have to meet. And it's my great pleasure to have met Adam since then. And it's my absolute honor to have Adam Gainsburg on the line with us now to talk about the 13th flower and the Venus synodic cycles. Hello, Adam. How in the heavens are you?
Very, very grateful to be here with you, Brett.
It's my pleasure. Adam, we had a little date last night. I'm not sure if you felt it, but I was drinking some tea and I had a candle lit and I was listening to some of your meditations and reading through this wonderful book of yours once again called The Light of Venus. And we're going to get into that, but wanted to pour you a cup of tea. So I picked
Thank-
out a special cup. This is the Venus
Oh,
cup for you, right?
yeah.
And I guess I'll just drink your cup at the end since you're on the East Coast and I'm a few time zones away. All right, so the moon is currently in the sign of Libra, but in a Leo cycle, new moon was August 14th, 2015. And the day after, in many senses, we had a new Venus, the Venus-Sun interior conjunction
Mhm.
in the 23rd degree of Leo. And we only have one of these every 584 days or every 19 months. And this is one of my great passions as a investigative astrologer and one of Adam's as well. In fact, this book, The Light of Venus, is something I highly recommend for so many purposes. So one thing I read in this book, Adam, is how you came to Western astrology in a sense in the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School, as I did, because it's a sky astrology course, and you, as our friend Gary Caton, and many others more and more now are really returning to a living connection to the sky as astrologers. And I was wondering if you could just speak to me about that.
How I came in, yeah. Well, I describe it somewhat in the book where when I was a kid, I grew up on the Jersey Shore, and I was always terrified when I would go camping about how big the sky was. I'm talking as a, as a small child, and it was always just too big, something too much. It was like too exposed. There wasn't enough barrier or buffer.
Mm.
So, long story short, years and years and years and years later, I'm an astrologer who practices from an emphasis and experience both with clients and with a lot of sky watching time under my belt. And that's what really informs me. So for me, I have gotten my major inspirations from sky experience. That means just laying myself underneath dark skies or brightly lit skies with not a lot of light pollution, good horizons, at the right latitude, looking in the right direction, etc. And just letting inspiration come and letting myself be challenged in some of my beliefs or experiences, and then bringing those insights, which are kind of raw and rough, into my client work and seeing if it actually plays out the understandings of the new possible interpretations actually plays out with the people that come to me for readings or for counseling. So that's kind of my 1-2. I get information from my direct experience or with a few others, and then I bring it in so that I know that it's not just my projection of what truth is. It's more viable for people that might be very, very different than me personally, vis-a-vis my clients.
Hmm.
So that's where the basic structure of the 13 phase system that I have comes from. The places where I demarcate one phase from another, some of which are classic and come from antiquity, but others of which might seem somewhat random or somewhat without a basis, but they actually come from a lot of client work, a lot of hundreds or thousands of hours in with people and seeing that a person born here doesn't exhibit the same qualities as a person born even just 3 days later because the Sun and Venus have made a different elongational relationship with each other. They've separated more in those 3 days, or they've come closer together in those 3 days. So that's really where my phase system for Venus phases comes from.
Yeah, there's this kind of running joke right now in the community that it used to be, what's your sign, baby? And then it was, what's your Venus sign? And now it's, what's your phase? And I think
Yes.
a lot of that is owed to your work. Yeah, and speaking about that living connection to the sky, I mean, that's my practice as well.
Yes.
And so much opens that way. I like to compare it to music. I compare many things to music because that was my last life and this current life. And I
Mm,
learned to play saxophone by this is a G and this is a E and this is a quarter note and this is what this sounds like. And then later I had to learn to be a musician, jamming with people, and that all goes away. And how
right.
to open up the ear in that real intuitive sense that's more of the natural thing. So the greatest musicians that I know they came up just learning with their ear. They learned to play music. And I mean, so many of the great musicians like the Beatles never learned to read, you know. But the greatest musicians I know, they came into it intuitively, and then they added the intellectual piece, the theory, to support what they had found intuitively before. And I feel that in my own astrological practice, I have so much more confidence here than I ever had in music, not only because it's most likely my dharma and my service in this world, because I feel so much that I've come home. But that because it's that way, I mean, I had looked through some of the Shamanic Astrology handbook and had a reading with Daniel in November of 2012. But when I was down in Peru in December of 2012, and I had this like 4-hour conversation with Jupiter, and whether it was schizophrenia or not, I don't really care, because that's when astrology returned to me and I returned to it. And so, you know, I feel now that Mercury is kind of my main teacher, even though I still study with Daniel, and I'm studying with Gary and all sorts of people, and my research is endless, including reading these great books like yours. And, you know, that story that you mentioned, there's another piece of it that I think is really important to bring in here, because you talk about how that fear of the big dark sky, and how present that was. I mean, it's like 2 sentences that you share, but you can really feel your heart in those words. And you talk about facing that fear, and kind of, there's this sentence you write about this mantra that it sounded like you had, that what was it? I'm afraid, and that's okay. I'm safe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not remembering the exact words, but yeah, something like that. Yeah,
It's,
I'm safe to feel for afraid or something like that.
Yeah, and that's so beautiful. And so going into those dark places, right? Because this Venus journey can very much be about that. It can be a time of kind of cleansing and reassembling and retrieving, you know, restructuring ourselves, and going into some of those dark places to find the light on the other side of the tunnel can be so important. So this courage that you expressed, you know, at whatever age it was that you started really facing that fear and just going out for nights under the open sky.
Mhm.
This is the courage that I'm talking about, to really dive into an intimate relationship with some of these cycles and really mine the value that they have for us. Because
Mhm.
I'm not one of these fate-based astrologers that, you know, we are just dancing to the gravitational or electromagnetic effects of these big balls in the sky. You know, I feel that this is very much a living relationship with very conscious partners in this earth game out here, our brothers and sisters out there. So there's another thing that I gleaned last night from one of your meditation CDs, because not only are you an astrological author and researcher and consulter, but there's this meditation practice that comes in. And one thing that you said, and this was in the Deep Heart Meditation CD that's available on your site, which I should share now, that's soulsign.com. Go check it out. But this is from your Deep Heart Meditation CD. It's not just about changing the emotional state or releasing yourself from something you don't want to be feeling. That's not meditation. In some ways, that's escape. And
Yeah.
I think that's a very valuable place for us to enter into this starry story of Inanna. So Inanna is this amazing tale, regardless, but why it's so amazing to we astrologers, and especially we sky astrologers who watch these dances of the planets, is that this story is keyed to the Venus synodic cycle, or Venus's 19-month dance with Earth and Sun.
Mhm.
And this was brought forth in many ways by Daniel Gemario in a Mountain Astrologer article in 1997, so I often hear people referencing that when I talk to them about this cycle, but that's because Daniel was out in the desert watching the sky. And so a lot of us will talk about the descent of Inanna into the underworld and her ascent from the underworld, which traces the Venus dance of the sky. But there's these kind of prequels to the book, and this reading, the hupu tree, is the first. And this really speaks about the time that we are in right now in the Venus cycle. Today is August 17th, 2015, Monday, the day of the moon, which is in Libra, so it's a wonderful time to be speaking about Venus. And in this prequel, Inanna moves the hupu tree from the banks of the Euphrates to her home in Uruk. And we're talking about moving the tree from the west to the east. And this is Venus, who is now retrograde now, transitioning from having spent almost 9 months as an evening star and now under the beams of the sun. And today, east of the sun, though still unseen, too close to the glare to be seen by our eyes quite yet. It'll be maybe another week when she will rise in the east and a new goddess and a new quest is born.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. One thing about that quote that you pull out from the Deep Heart meditation is it totally applies to this particular time about how meditation is often seen, especially Westerners, because as a culture, we have no historical reference to the long, long thousands of years tradition of meditation like that some in the East do. So we don't really know what it is. So we use the word and we apply it to something. In the same way, we don't really have a relationship with this dyad of Venus. We want Venus to be about peace, love, harmony. We don't want her to be about discord, war, conflict. You know, and so that's our preference, understandable, but it's our bias. And in that bias, we're turning away half of our awareness to the other side of this other part of us, which is Venus. I mean, Venus is the sister planet of the Earth. We are sisters. We are siblings. We can say, like, even in the Mayan myth, the hero twins, you can see that as a Earth-Venus relationship in some ways. So the quote, I love how you pulled it out. It's not directly related because it's about that particular meditational form, the deep heart meditation that I do, but it very much applies, like you say, to this time right now, where we are really changing so much. We're changing things we don't even see. We're being changed to something that is out of our control. Venus coming out of the Western to the Eastern is one way of seeing it, but it's one whole cycle to the next cycle. That's a paradigmatic shift. That's like a different kind of rain cloud under which we're walking around, either dancing in the rain or walking underneath an umbrella. It's not just changing umbrellas, it's changing the type of rainstorm that we're underneath. We're changing the kind of sunlight that we're bathing in on the shore, you know, changing the kind of snow that's falling, the kind of storm front that's producing precipitation. It's like that big level. Like, so for me, this shift that we're doing right now, that, like you said, happens every 19 months, it takes a while, in my experience, to make the transition. And, you know, pioneers like yourself who are putting out these incredible materials being pulled from different areas, music, astrology, meditation, mythology, history, anthropology, you know, all makes it so much easier for us to be aligned with this transition. But for me personally, what I've come to believe myself personally is a transition from one cycle to the next. That is, when Venus stations retrograde in the evening, quickly descends and disappears, and then reappears before the sun in the morning sky, signaling the start of a new cycle. That's a process. Even though it happens to our eyes very quickly, it's a process that we take many months to come to integrate or to start to really be able to live with, you know. And I actually see it personally, again, so just my opinion is that at the middle section of the cycle, at the superior or the exterior conjunction, is when we're really learning, do we want to walk with this cycle, or are we going to live kind of in denial? Are we going to kind of go, oh, this one's not for me to walk with, I'm going to walk with another one? It takes that long sometimes to make this big transition.
Right, and to put some dates to that for those of you listening, this cycle in many senses would have begun August 15th, 2015. We could argue possibly July 25th, 2015, and we'll get into that. But the other side of the cycle that Adam's mentioning, that will come our way on June 6th, 2016, which is
Right.
like the most charged chart of next year anyway, with that mutable grand cross. But I diverge here. Yeah, and so some of the astrological suggestions are that Venus retrograde is a terrible time to engage in love, which is just a really heartbreaking statement because Venus always wants love, right? And I haven't been at this long, but I do have some data because last time Venus was retrograde, there were 3 different clients I had that called and said, I met this guy and I'm not supposed to go for it now, right? I said, no, always choose love, and all those relationships are very sound right now and very beautiful. But one thing that we're told that I have found very true, not only in my own practice, but in a lot of clients that I'm sitting with and friends, is that sometimes old lovers will show up. And even from, these kind of past life feelings, I like to call it instamacy, when we meet somebody and we know there's something there, right? And that thing's showing up, or some of the chords that we have connected still to those of us who we had a painful ending with, or a shameful ending with, or whatever. And this is this energy that I feel can be so present to a lot of dreams about old lovers or old friends that in a sense we've moved away from, whatever, coming in at this time and asking us to really address, to me, what is this wound, so we can bring some love to it, some forgiveness, some healing, and really open to a new way of the heartfelt experience and expression.
Yeah, I love that, Brett. In addition, it's not just old loves coming back, it's old value systems being thrown up in our face. And when you talk about value systems, you immediately bring up the word attachments. So old attachments to how things should be, how I should be feeling, or how you should not be treating me. As well as, old relationships with our own social scene. This is all Venus language. So, my old expectation of how many friends I should have, or what my friends should be doing for me, and all that. So the Venus retrograde will literally throw us or retro us to look back at ourselves in all the Venus signified areas of life. It doesn't matter what it is,
Yeah, and as the Venus cycle is 8 years, so I'm turning 40 on October 24th this year. So this is my
So
5th
you're in a Venus.
Venus synodic return cycle.
Wow.
And I woke up on August 15th having decided that I wasn't going to do a group at my house. That was a plan for a while. I was like, I've got to create this thing and bring in all these magicians, and I got to get Marya on the horn, and it's all unfolding very quickly, which feels good because my intention is for the goddess to speak through me in this time. But so sometimes these themes of 8 years, because the cycle is so harmonic and so beautiful, there can be these fractal time periods that come in and present themselves, and it can go back archetypally, like way into deep history. And when we talk about the moving of the hupu tree,
Right.
and the transition during this Venus retrograde, which is Venus as close to Earth as she gets, passing
Right.
Earth, and she moves from the evening sky to the morning sky. We're also talking, as Adam mentioned, a shift from the archetypal essence of one cycle to the next. And so, for example, people who know my work know I play the moon game, right? And even though the sun will soon shift into the sign of Virgo, for me it's still a Leo moon cycle, right? And a Leo moon game until the next new moon, which will be in the later degrees of Virgo next month or next month. And this is similar for Venus. She starts her quest, her 19-month, her 584-day quest, and a sign. And last cycle, which began either January 11th, 2014, or January 17th, depending on how you look at the thing. Either way, it was in the sign of Capricorn. So for the last 19 months, Venus, and therefore the divine feminine energy, has been investigating the essence of Capricorn. And the true essence of Capricorn may be one of the most misunderstood at this time, I would say, but the Council of Grandmothers, those intent on preserving the true earth wisdom for the 7 future generations. I like to call it the trunk of the tree itself. And so this is, in these cycles, always a release and a rebirth and a return. And so Venus has done that since January of 2014. It was a huge Capricorn year, Capricorn new moon on New Year's Day and on winter solstice last year, you know, and Pluto in Capricorn. And so much of that energy really helping us come back to the elder wisdom. Actually, I'm called to read one of the Sabian symbols for the degree, the 14th degree of Capricorn, where Pluto is today, and where Pluto was when this new Venus cycle began, and where Pluto was during the Grand Cross of 2014 that many were speaking about. And it reads this way, the 14th degree of Capricorn. An ancient bas-relief carved in granite remains a witness to a long-forgotten culture. And Dane Rudhyar's keynote from an astrological mandala is this: the will to unearth in our culture, as well as in any culture, what has permanent value, and to let go of non-essentials. Mm-hmm. And I feel there's so much resonance here with Capricorn Venus, yes?
Yes. Yeah, I see that level that you were speaking about, this archetypal theme that each cycle is an embodiment of, and it goes from one to the next to the next, of Capricorn, as you're mentioning here, as in this case, the Capricorn feminine within each of us. So that's how I have seen that is a very accessible way for people to understand it. So the feminine and the masculine are beyond our ability to comprehend them. I'm not speaking here about gender, male and female. Like I joke, I'm not talking about your plumbing when I use feminine and masculine. But feminine and masculine are these principles, these cosmological principles, far bigger than I. They are the two that the original one broke into or separated into. And there's lots of beautiful, very powerful rendering from ancient, like proto-Hinduism, which way predates Buddhism, and even Chinese Taoism, very, very old, these ways of conceptualizing like the yin and the yang, that symbol. If you really look at that and you go in there with your heart wide open, you're going to find some amazing experiences in how that relationship is. Because as they say in some of the translations, they say the masculine and the feminine are not two. And there's a hyphen between those, not hyphen two. And that's because that's the closest way you can talk about them. You can't say that they are one, because they're not the same, but they're not two. So it points to kind of this openness, this emptiness. And that Capricorn femininity, now, as you were saying beautifully, Brett, coming into a Leo femininity within each of our hearts, within each of our cellular bodies, is kind of like pointing to a mystery that cannot be fathomed with our local mind, our imaginations, even our dream states. Every way that we have to access something like the feminine or the Leonine feminine is still a translation from the original source. It's still a transducing of the energy or the consciousness down into something that we as local beings can do, can be with, can be inspired by, can live from, can align with, can teach, can learn, all that. And so it's, for me, that archetypal theme that each cycle embodies is kind of the way I talk about it in when I'm teaching the class on this stuff is that's the goddess, in this case because it's Venus, that's the goddess that humanity is in service to now. So it would be, humanity has just started to become aware that we as a species are in service to the Leo feminine, the Leo, and that's what I mean by the goddess. I don't mean a goddess as anthropomorphized by any different culture, either ancient or extant. It's more that we are in service to the principle of the feminine, which has 12 faces according to astrological mandala. And it's the facet on that crystal that is the Leo facet that we are now being reflected by through the pure light of consciousness.
Mm. Before we talk about that essence, Adam, could you take us into the Capricorn feminine?
Yeah. So for me, all the signs have a masculine and a feminine valence. Yeah. So regarding Capricorn femininity, just like, and I totally agree with you about Capricorn is probably the most misunderstood sign, especially today where we're coming out of the last couple thousand years and where we're moving into is Capricorn has this dual side to it, similar to Venus herself. And you can see this in the original image of Capricorn, which is the fish goat, the constellational image. So the upper half of this being was a goat, a mountain goat. The back half was a fish with a very powerful tail. So it could walk on water. In other words, it could traverse through land and it could traverse through water. And this represents in our current culture kind of how we are in all of us. And the feminine in humanity is very much about relationship with oneself, relationship with one's body, relationship with one's emotional state or energetic state, relationship with another person, relationship with how we want them to be compared versus how they actually are, relationship with our external resources, relationship with the land, the relationship with what for us is sacred. It's all matter of the other, capital O. That is, as best as I can do, in a very pragmatic, accessible way, without getting too arcane and reachy, is that's the best. It's the relationship with everything. Therefore, Venus is a big signifier in astrology for our personal mystery, because we often don't know or don't even want to have a relationship with many different parts of ourselves. We want to kind of know that we're on the right track. We want to know that we're not too uncomfortable. We want to know that we're living how we should be, all of that in alignment. So Capricorn femininity speaks to this. And this last cycle was about learning to take responsibility for the things that we don't know about ourselves. And this is this two-face, this other side of the Capricorn. This is like the watery side of Capricorn that's often very innocent. There's incredible innocence about Capricorn qualities. Beautiful, almost like untainted, pure innocence, and even a naivete about Capricorn. But it's the internal side. It's not the external, the express side of the Capricorn consciousness. So I think that's really what it was about. What are we willing and not yet willing to take responsibility for in all of these relationships that we have? As the Buddha say, in all the 10 directions, or the Native Americans, the 4 directions, the 6 directions, the 7 directions. And are we willing to make a difference if those choices aren't working for us anymore? I think that's what the overall Capricorn is about. And now the Leo is definitely a different trip.
Yeah, and so that Capricorn essence, so much came in for me just then as you were speaking, and most of the astrology books that I found my way to actually put Capricorn forward as this kind of police state and governance, and I do like to enter the archetypes from a Northern Hemisphere seasonal perspective. I think that brings a lot of their story to us. And that Capricorn time is dark, and you better have chosen the right cave and canned the peaches, you know what I mean? And so there is some we got to keep it together here. But it's this organic structure. That's why I call it the trunk of the tree. And the roots, they dig into the lineage, the ancestry and the language of all history that is contained within all of ourselves. And so it doesn't have to be this forced wisdom. And especially with the feminine essence of it, which can be a little more playful, right? And watery, as Adam described it. I love that. And it brings the story to mind. That's one of my favorite kind of Capricorn Venus stories, because there is this archetype that Daniel and Kaylin of Shamanic Astrology bring forth, which is the Council of Grandmothers for Capricorn, and especially Venus in Capricorn, I would say. And we have these 13 grandmothers who are appearing all over the place now, and it's wonderful. And one of them, Eric Nez, related this story to me. I think it was Grandma Agnes. She was at the Beloved Festival a couple years back, and she's up on stage doing her thing. It was this water blessing, and she says, I hear all you talking about how you're going to save the earth and really tend to Earth Mother, and it touches my heart. But then I look out here and I see all these plastic cups. And she says, what, you didn't know you were going to drink today? She's like, here's my cup right here. And she breaks out this silver cup, and it'll take cold, it'll take hot. I thought I'd drink some water at this festival and maybe some tea, and who knows, maybe that once a year, a cup of coffee or something. So just think when you drink. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be this forced, you are doing it wrong, this is the new way, get in line. That really seems to be put forth by these people who I feel like are hurting Capricorn in that true organic essence. And in a sense, therefore, Saturn too, but maybe that's a whole nother discussion. But so we are transitioning now out of Capricorn. And it doesn't say like, okay, it's just this switch that's gone and now Leo, right?
Right.
And we get to see in these cycles, as we move through the solar year, how does Capricorn inform Aquarius, which is next? As we look at the nodes, which move retrograde, right? How does Capricorn inform Sagittarius? And now this Venus cycle, which is this beautiful 5-petaled rose through the zodiac or through the space as we look from Earth, moves from Capricorn to Leo. So how can Capricorn inform Leo? And before we really dive into that question, Adam, who is the Leo feminine?
Yeah. So the Leo feminine, or the Leonine, the Leo feminine, the Leonine feminine is the part of everyone, women and men equally. This is not reserved for women exclusively by any stretch. The Leo feminine is someone who honors, and honors is not an intellectual activity. Honors is, I'm going to use a Capricorn word here, a commitment to being, or I was going to say to being willing, but it's a commitment to living out of the center of my life, even if I don't know what that is yet. So Leo, as many know, correlates with the heart and the center of inspiration and creativity and play and love and the light, and it through planetary relationship it relates to the sun. But Leo as its own hold-on is the container for the completeness of the self, and not having nothing to do with narcissism here, but rather than, that in our language, Brett, self-centered is a pejorative term. So I like to use the word centered in selfness. And that's what Leo feminine is. Remember, feminine is relationship with everything, including our bodies, the physical experience, overall by the feminine principle. Okay, the physical, the physical form is governed by the feminine, or physicality. So you can say the physical universe is feminine, and that's why in ancient Egypt, Nut, the great goddess of the evening sky, her body, her corpus was the sky. In other words, what we can see without leaving our bodies to go, what we can actually see physically was a feminine figure. It was not a masculine, seventh chakra, imagination, enlightened realm. It was a woman, representative of this feminine principle that we all, men and women, have within us. So for me, the Leo feminine is about living in that principle of centered in selfness, where it's, and remember, I'm speaking here from a very high level of the Leo feminine. Many people are still, including myself, are still learning this one. But the Leo feminine is, how can I be whole and perfect unto myself, and then share that light that arises or that emanates or that radiates out for others to see. So in our culture, we say, I'm going to commit to expressing myself creatively, artistically. For me, when I look at that, an artist expressing themselves, either in whatever media they work, sculpture, music, dance, painting, whatever, what I see with that is a perfect crystallization of the Leo principle. And as it relates to the feminine, it's I'm going to share myself fully. I'm going to allow the creative genius that is me to come forward fully without necessarily needing to have center stage or without needing to overshine someone else or put down someone else's creative genius that might be expressing something that's quite in contrast to what I'm expressing.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I mean, and we have to talk about, and you brought this in, that there's many octaves of these archetypes,
Oh my
right?
God, there's
And
so many.
so we hear this thing that Leo needs the stage and Leo needs the spotlight. And I think that is available in one of the lower octaves. But as we cycle up through this beautiful spiral, we get to a place where no, the stage needs Leo because
Right.
Leo is the spotlight. The
Yeah,
illuminated one who has lit that cauldron, those roaring flames of the fire, that torch so brightly that we can each ignite our own candle from it simply by unwrapping the present of that presence.
yeah,
And so,
beautiful.
in the cultural contamination that really challenges the archetypal investigation of most of the fixed signs, right? Where we are told that some service to self growth is vain or egocentric, and we lose the ability to have confidence when it's taught to us that that is only cockiness, or true pride when we're taught that that is arrogance, right?
Yes.
Lions roll in pride. So there's this key term of sovereignty. In fact, the Facebook group that I've started to post these interviews and sharings and music and all these different things, it's called the sovereign scepter of the lioness. You know, there's something about that queen taking her crown back, but it starts here, right? It starts like bringing the fire out of the spiritual ethers and bringing it into our core.
Yes. What you mentioned something, Brett, that just brought up something for me is if I'm expressing or if I'm being or acting in a way that I need to have center spotlight, center stage, then that means, and there's no real arguing this is just if I have a need to be center stage all the time, or more often than not, or whatever, then that means that at a deeper, more powerful level of my consciousness, I don't believe that I am the center stage, that I will ever be it, or nor that I deserve it.
Mm.
So anyone needing something like that in an attached way necessarily equals an unconscious belief that I don't have it and I won't have it. And that's where that need, narcissism, egotism comes from. It's the precursory, pre-existing belief that I'm not that already. And that's what the Leo feminine, I think, invokes us towards, to experience ourself as whole already in our bodies.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, Leo has this very creative, manifestative quality to it. And
Yes.
if we lose ourselves to needing to be seen, then we cannot really open that creative force. I mean, even on the higher essence of allowing creator to create through us, like the canvas does not paint itself without the brush in your hand. You know what I
Right.
mean? So I hear a lot of people saying, "Oh, I need to do my art more." It's like, "No, your art needs you. Actually, isn't that what you're here for?" But playing with that kind of Leo light and shadow, it's really a dance in this world, and I get to face it all the time. Here's this podcast thing. Okay, how many people liked that? Did somebody comment? You know what I mean? And really falling into that. It's like, wait a second, that's actually just doling that creative force that I've asked to come speak through me. And when I
Yes.
let that go, then I can create, right? Without worrying about any of that stuff. I mean, I like to say that, if people aren't showing up to a presentation or something, I don't care. Like, I would say this to a wall. In fact,
Right.
I often do, right? So, but all right. So, one thing we're touching here I like to play with these not only as how does the last cycle and the fully, in this case, the fully kind of evolved feminine Capricorn inform Leo. So how do we bring that higher octave of Capricorn into this Leo quest to support it? But on the other side, what from the Capricorn zone would actually keep us from diving deep into Leo? Right. And by that, I mean, even some of these traditions, if we could look at some of the shadow Capricorn, some of that can be, oh, it is ego to love yourself. Right.
Yes.
I mean, it's so
Yes.
easy for us to love others and so difficult for us to truly love ourselves. Right.
Yes.
But when
Yes.
we find that place, or so I'm told, then we're giving that gift of love to everyone around us.
Right. That we're giving love to everyone around us without the agenda to give that love to everyone around us. In other words, it's happening spontaneously. And that's the sign of, for me, that's the deepest evidence of embodiment, of that word embodiment. When what I'm doing and being is ease or is effortless or easeful for me, and it's having a spontaneous outpouring or an effect on other people without forcing something down their throat, without trying to teach someone something, without trying to force my incredibly brilliant new artistic invention into a gallery opening, so that's the sign of embodiment. When you've embodied it and it's just emanating, or it's like naturally radiating out of you.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have something. Because if I'm still trying to prove the world how wonderful I am, I'm still learning how wonderful I am. I'm still in that school. I'm still in that classroom.
Right. So this cycle will help us tap into releasing cultural contamination, I would suggest, that would keep us from knowing how wonderful we are.
Exactly.
And
yes.
So in this transition, and this is why I love this story so much of this moving of the hupu tree. The serpent has made its home in the roots, and the abzu bird and its family in the branches, and the dark made lilitu in the trunk, And so when I look into these three things, first of all, what comes in is, core shamanism worldwide, right? The three worlds, upper world, lower world, middle world, often shown through a world tree with a bird at the top, a snake at the bottom. Like in Peru, for example, it is serpent, condor, and then for the middle world, puma. But here in this expression, we see the dark made lilitu and the trunk of the tree itself expressing this middle world. And as I feel into this, and this really came in looking at some of the significant dates of one cycle to the next, so what this is these are not some enemies that Anana needs to kick out of the tree. What they are the higher world, the lower world, and the middle world essences of the feminine who has achieved totality in the last archetype, in this case Capricorn, and now we've got to push some of that away just so we can have the courage to go through the rebirth process once again. And so there is this ascension, there is this continual passing of the torch from one cycle to the next, but there's also a bit of, I will release that wisdom so that I can take a new journey, or else why else would I go? Or maybe I go because of the wisdom. And so the image that comes in for me is this composting of that world tree that we have grown into soil that will host the seeds that we plant now. So as we shift from Capricorn, can we really use that earth to plant seeds of Leo fire?
Beautiful. It's so rich, but you really bring in the imagery beautifully. Because this transition is happening with Venus closest to Earth than she ever gets, I would say that composting process produces a very hot soil. So there's a greater amount of heat in this particular composting process, more so than in the middle of the cycle when Venus is furthest from us, and it's a different process. It's not composting the tree because it's still part of the tree. It's still part of that cycle. But this process, that compost, it's very, the composting is going on not in a dark bin that you have way in your backyard and you're turning it around and turning it around. Like our noses and our faces are in that. We are being composted.
Mm.
So when people, like when I do readings for people and I see people born right around this time in whatever cycle they were born in, when they were born, they were born when Venus was very close to Earth, retrograde and invisible, right around here on either side of the sun. I'm always talking about this heat, this unavoidable presence that like you want to turn away from it, but but they were born in the closest Venus proximity. So Venus and the Earth are like embracing,
Mm.
just from a spatial distance standpoint, you know. And Brett, you had asked me before. I wanted to share just a few things about this. From Capricorn to Leo, you know. So what must be relaxed, you asked? What must be relaxed of Capricorn to support the open spaciousness, the new conception and inception of the Leo feminine, which we're in right now, is one way to say it is to give up the metrics of
Oh,
and the
Adam,
chains.
please say that again because you broke up right at that key moment. Give
Okay,
up
yeah,
the metrics.
give up the metrics of progress, the chains of responsibility, and the who answers to who
Mm.
for the abundant reservoir of inspiration, right? Like think about this. Like if we're if in our personality makeup, which a person's whole birth chart can really talk about, if if I'm a natural born business leader or an entrepreneur, and I've made a success of it by having very clear chains of command in my businesses. I have people that work for me. There's a very specific way that we do things to achieve efficiencies, to do our business, or even forget business. I'm a person who has a natural innate wiring to be a family person, to be a great husband, to be a great wife, to be a great father or mother. What this is asking us to do is to give up the ways that it has worked in the past, where okay, that's your job, that's my job, this is your chores, that's my chores, and start to open up to more creative flow or dynamism of, hey, you know what, today I want to do your chores, I don't want to do mine, or today I don't want to do any chores, can we leave it off for a day,
Hmm.
just because I'm feeling that that's what I really need today. That kind of shift is like moving from Capricorn to Leo. It takes a bit of courage and faith to leap out of the kind of the known structure of, when I get up, I know I have to eat breakfast within 2 hours, otherwise I da 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 da, or I know that I don't like to eat after 9 o'clock or whatever like that. It's like that's like a Capricorn thing. Leo is like, well, I'm just available. I'm available to see how I'm inspired and what will support me. You
Yes.
know, so in some ways it's like a relief when you look at it more archetypally. Oh, Leo, so wonderful. Capricorn, so kind of contracting, but living as physical beings on the planet with certain responsibilities, it's going to be a challenge. That's why I give up myself and all my people lots of time, months and months, to allow the alignment, the cellular biorhythmic circadian rhythm alignment with this new cycle to take form,
Mm.
to happen within me organic. It's like you said, very importantly, it's not just turning on a dime. Just because Venus is another degree on the other side of the sun doesn't mean we're suddenly in the Leo cycle all of a sudden. It really is it's like as this comes up, this goes down. As that comes up, that goes down. It really is a dynamic. It's like this is what I call astrology as a wave rather than astrology as a particle.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the birth chart readings, a lot of astrology today is astrology as a particle.
Mm-hmm.
When we're fixing the horoscope of the birth moment, the first breath moment, and we're reading this, and we're paying it. This phase work and the cycle work that you are bringing forward is so much more like astrology as a waveform. And astrology is both, just like light is both. Love is both.
Absolutely. And I think actually in this coming Saturn Neptune square, this year, we're really
Yes.
going to be able to see in our lives in every way, particle versus wave.
What
And
we're
can we
choosing.
practice both? You know, I mean, I'm kind of a wave astrologer, and yet I'm studying Hellenistic astrology too, which is extremely particle, you know?
Awesome. You're
And
studying Composting. I
yeah,
didn't
yeah,
know that.
yeah.
That's
Well, because you know, I'm learning the music theory now to support my ear, to use that metaphor from before.
wow.
You know, I
Wow.
mean, Adam, your language has such an incredible gift of resonating your heart's message. And
Mm,
it's such a joy to have you on here. I mean, one thing in your sharing that came in for me is that the day of my birth, okay, is October 24th, 1975. And so then you know, because this cycle is so harmonic and beautiful, that I'm born basically at the maximum elongation, or the highest Venus gets in the sky. And in your system, that's Venus at fullness, right? So on this day in
yes.
Iceland, 1975, October 24th, there was a walkout of women from the home. The children were like literally like abandoned, and men had to come home to take care of their kids, you know? And it has this incredible, like, very like, okay, we're Leo now. This was the first Leo cycle if we use the heliacal
Oh,
rise
oh,
as the starting point, shifting out, you know, from Virgo as they retrograde into Leo. It was also 1975, Times Man of the Year for 1975 was Women of the Year, though it was still called Man of the Year. Um, and, you know, so we're speaking about feminine and masculine. This is really important. And this comes into this story as well, because Anana chasing out the serpent and the bird, and Lilitu, who I feel so much are not some external her, but this internal her, so she can begin a new process that does not happen without help from Gilgamesh, right?
right.
And so I'm going
Right.
to read to you from the words of a very wise man named Adam Gainsburg, from a book called The Light of Venus. The feminine and masculine, irrespective of your gender, are the most essential bases of existence. They do not create who you are, but they are at the heart of everything you will ever discover yourself to be. They are the formless blueprint, the primordial gel into which your karma, genetics, and cultural programming are imprinted. In fact, at the highest level, there is no feminine or masculine. At the highest level, they are utterly united. For us mortals, though, trying to understand something about them can be more than a little helpful if we wish to understand our lives in the right context. And below, male or female is your gender, masculine and feminine are your birthrights. You have one gender and both forces. Lucky you. So I love that. And to a lot of my quest in this 13-month sharing is to really get into the yin and the yang. I had a friend create this. I was giving this talk a lot called the 13th flower, and a couple of things I would love to share this with you. Actually, in
Yeah.
the Mercury retrograde cycles, I tend to just really get into the glyphs and just stare at the glyphs of the signs and the planets until my eyes blur, and it opens this window that can be really incredible.
Yes.
It's as much as I've done looking down at a sheet of paper to tap into that energy that we receive when we look up.
Okay.
And what I was shown was this, because the Mercury retrogrades, as you know, are all in the air signs this year, is a really
Right.
cool study of yin and yang. Because we
Mm.
start with Gemini, right, which is this division, which is this duality, these pillars. And so there is this kind of separation, this independence of the two.
Mhm.
But then we get to Libra, and they're lying horizontally, right? And
Yes.
balanced in the scales. And it's almost this dependence, this study of relationship. And sacred
Yes.
geometry teaches us that the curved line is feminine and the straight line is masculine. So this thing is more equal than an equal sign, right? So we might expect by the
Beautiful.
time we get to the third air sign, just one line. They've merged, they've become, you know, unified. But that's not what we see with Aquarius, these two rigid sawtooth lines, often confused for water waves because of this, but they are waves, they're energy waves, they're chi, ki, right?
Yes.
Pneumos, prana, this.
Yeah.
And the study teaches us, no, it's not about utter independence or dependence, but
Mm-hmm.
interdependence. So how can we honor
Yes.
them as different charges for the one work, right? We don't make electricity without a negative and a positive pole. And while those words, carry too much energy to bring here, in a sense, negative and positive, but this is feminine and masculine as they empower one another.
Yeah. Let's see. To me, the element of air is all about relationship. If we're speaking element in an element way, air brings in the quality of relationship with, relationship of, relationship as, relationship in and out. So that glyphic insight you've had, I mean, it's fantastic. So now I'm not sure how to exactly correlate that with the Venus cycle, but
Well,
this year, you know, well, put it this way, your questions and inviting me to participate in your journey here is that the air element year for the Mercury cycle, the retrograde periods, in this transition of the Venus cycle. Now, what is the relationship with what is passing away and what is coming in? You know, yeah. Sorry, you gonna say something?
Well, I was just going to say the air quality, and I love that you bring this in. I feel it's very much of the statement of this feminine essences, this Leo quest of her birth chart in a way, because we've got that North Node in Libra and approaching the autumnal equinox point where it will
Yes.
cross into Virgo on November 11th. 2015 is a very special time. I'm gonna bring in some of your work with Gary around Venus and Mars here in a second.
Awesome.
But right, since February 17th, 2014, we have had North Node, kind of the forward calling of our collective consciousness to really focus on the yin and the yang.
Yes.
And so I was saying in this talk a lot, you spin a yin yang and they don't become one color. It pulses. And I was
Yes.
saying that, and I'd never seen it, And so I told my friend that, and he's like, "How do you know?" And he's like this incredible computer animator, right? So he made one for me. I'll send it to you. It
Yeah.
is such a fascinating study of the yin yang. And so when you do get to that speed, it is a pulsing. But while you're ramping up, what we did was accelerate it there. And at times the fish are moving one way and the dots are moving the others. They form these incredible different geometries, triangles and squares. And it's a fascinating study. So that's also for people listening. It's on the movies page of my website, morethan.astrology.com. You can watch Spin Yang. It didn't come in like the full speed just because of internet. Who knows? All right, so I'm going way too far
No. That's
into
exciting. I'm going to
Wonderland
check that
here.
out. That video is very cool. I'm going to check that out.
Right on. So I'm speaking of the birth chart of this Venus. I mean, there's two different places where people have begun this cycle, and so many would say it is August 15th, 2015, because this is Venus interior conjunction to Sun, as Adam mentioned, as close as she gets to Earth. And in the old systems, this is Kazemi, when Venus is in the heart of it, or in the throne room of the king. It's been said, though maybe some of that language should be relaxed a little bit. But
Yeah.
Shamanic Astrology, which is the stock of my starry stew, and Adam's practice as well in the light of Venus, is to say, yes, she is seated then. She is seated then, but she is actually born when we can first visibly see her in the sky. And this is called her heliacal rising. It tends to come to us when she has now retrograded 10 degrees east, or earlier in the zodiac from the sun, when Venus, just for a moment, her light can be seen before sunrise, and then every day she will get higher and higher very quickly as she shoots up there to her highest and brightest points coming in October.
Yes.
So one thing that I've done in my work is to investigate what's happening in the world as Venus shifts archetypes. And I'm honoring the birth, as you do, into a new quest, into an archetypal sign of the zodiac through that heliacal rising point. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so the deal is Venus, and throughout the course of this 19 months and this continuing 13th flower presentation, we'll be looking all into this. So if you haven't seen this yet, it's coming your way soon. But Venus and Sun and Earth form this amazing 5-petaled rose or pentagram throughout the zodiac from Earth's view over the course of 8 years, 13 Venus years. There are 5 of these points, a pentagram. But the pentagram, while it is so resonant, so harmonic, for example, August 15th, 2015, we have the Venus interior conjunction to Sun in the 23rd degree of Leo. And that means about August 15th, it'd probably be more August 13th, 2023, 8 years later, it will be in the same place, though having moved just a couple degrees retrograde. So we'll most likely be August 13th, 2015, at the 21st degree of Leo. I'm saying that I haven't looked yet. But the point is the whole pentagram very slowly retrogrades, thank you for that, Adam, through the zodiac. And so it's kind of an average of 100 or 104 years, one of these points, because Venus is only investigating 5 of the signs at a time, one of them will shift signs. And so some of what I feel is coming into this quest is this. Venus, just around the time of the 19th Amendment being ratified, women's right to vote, 2 of the points shifted, one from Sagittarius into Scorpio and another from Taurus into Aries. So in traditional associations of planets of the sign, from Sagittarius, Jupiter into Scorpio, Mars, and from Taurus, Venus into Aries, Mars. So 2 of the 5 Venus points, the feminine points, go into Mars, into the masculine investigation. And if you read the words of the women of the suffrage movement at the time, this is very present. They're talking about courage and taking back our independence and our rights, you know what I mean? And it's really cycle when we look through this course of the time since then, and we will in this investigation. In the feminist movements, that's really come strong and come forward, and so much has been taken back. But in so many ways, it's also kind of exploded in those like shoulder pad power suits of the 80s. And where is like the feminine power in this thing, right? So we're coming into a shifting time, and we are all born to participate with this, because those same 2 points that carry some relative Martian energy will be shifting in this coming decade. The Scorpio cycle has ended if you honor heliacal rising as your start point. So in 2018, what has been Scorpio since the 19th Amendment will become Libra. So with traditional planetary associations, Venus shifting out of Mars back into Venus. And regardless of what start point you work with, the opposite point of the cycle, the exterior conjunction, when Venus is farthest from Earth, and she made that conjunction right around the time of the Scorpio solar eclipse last year. Her conjunction point was on October 25th, 2014, and it was in the 2nd degree of Scorpio, and it was the last exterior conjunction point for this cycle in the sign of Scorpio until 2177, okay? And the Sabian symbol for this point, dig this, reads thus: a delicate bottle of perfume lies broken, releasing its fragrance.
Radiating, like we were talking about before. Yes.
And I see it's gotten so structured and fixed and firm in this way, you know, like achieving in a sense like that masculine power, and which is really kind of a false masculine, but anyway. And now it shatters, and that power of beauty, that fragrance comes back, right?
Yes. You know, there's so much here, Brett. I mean, there's so much here. How women and men express masculine and the feminine. Though a very masculine man might never call his great workout in the gym beautiful, from the perspective of the feminine, being who he is.
Adam, you broke up again just at that key moment. So from the perspective of the feminine,
yeah, from the perspective of so a masculine man, a guy's guy, working out in the gym, having a really great workout, like, you know, bench pressing more than he's ever done before. He hit a new peak for himself. From the language of the feminine, though he would never describe that experience as beautiful, he might describe it as awesome, powerful, kick-ass, personal accomplishment, all that. The feminine would see that as beautiful because he's doing what he wants and he's embodying it.
Mm.
So that's where it gets very tricky and so complex and so variegated about how we describe our experiences as men and women who each have both feminine and masculine in them. In so, and this goes back to this thing this idea that I shared a bit earlier. I'm just going to repeat it in this context. Is the principles of the feminine and masculine, and even the archetypal purity of these 12-sided feminine, or the 13 flowers, they're beyond our ability to really wrap around with our mind, with our identification ability. It really is a matter of living it and letting the experience kind of reveal us to it. And so, just as a side note here, maybe, or whatever, in the last year or two, I've moved more to, in terms of my astrological work, is writing and lecturing or whatever on finding better ways to trigger experiences for people to happen, and less about the speaking to a bunch of very brilliant heads.
Right. You're a heart man.
I'm a heart guy. I'm an experience guy, like a true experience. And so when you invited me to do this, Brett, and I was looking at what you were doing here on the Facebook group, which is just wonderful. I'm like, great, you're picking it up, because I kind of let it go, because I found that honestly where this came from was I found that I was better able to serve my clients from helping foster in them experiences of who they are than a bunch of maps of who they are.
Well, I'll take the nerd candle for a while.
Dude,
yeah, I gave a talk in Denver this year, and this woman after, she's like, "You're like an astrologer, but you're really emotional," which I just loved. You said something in there that is so key to your work, that the beauty of doing what you love and embodying it. And so one thing that you speak about in The Light of Venus, which I really recommend everyone pick up, it's an incredible study, not only of this cycle in astrology, but of heartfelt experience. But you speak about Venus as the essence of the divine feminine in our chart, and then the phase of Venus on your chart as your feminine dharma.
Yeah. Do you want me to? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. For me, the word in this one context, because I use the word dharma in other areas of my work, for me, the word dharma means what out of my innate cellular genius that I was born with. It's just a matter of how much I'm going to expose myself to. However much of that I'm allowing myself to happen, how do I contribute that particular personal genius of mine to the benefit of others, to an authentic contribution to an improvement of other people's lives, the world, systems, my local community, the land, Mother Earth, Father Sky, what have you. So for me, dharma is what I do with, in a very tangible way, what I do with my particular feminine nature, my sacred feminine, my sacred masculine, for that matter. So that's dharma, and that's what the phase is. So in my system, there's 13 phases of Venus. Each of the phases of Venus represents, of course, a particular dharma. So if I'm born in phase 4, whatever that is, the description of phase 4 of the Venus cycle would say, okay, this is how whatever my Venus is, which is Venus in the sign and the house and the aspects on my birth chart, how that Venus, which is my personal Venus self, my feminine self, gets expressed. So that my personal Venus in phase 4 is how I'm supposed to take who I am as a feminine being and do something positive with it in the world. And that's what I mean by feminine dharma. That's really the main, I guess, reason why I wrote the book, because I was getting a little tired of really wonderful, brilliant astrology work out there just be remaining in concepts
Hmm.
and inspiring talk. It's like, this is how I do it. And like it's very, very important. It sounds so simple and obvious, but it's so important. If my feminine or masculine or both or whatever dharma or Jupiter dharma or whatever it might be is to be a parent to one child, for whatever reason, karmically, dharmically, that's what my major contribution to the world is, to conceive, give birth, and rear a child in the best way that I can, which means I'm walking with them, then that is a fully complete dharmic fulfillment. I mean, it's a dharmic fulfillment. But if your dharma is that you were born with a silver spoon, every year you have an extra $3 million in the bank, and you realize that it's not just about fulfilling your material desire, do something with it, and you start to make a serious dent into the poverty condition of a third world country, and that's actually happening by your nonprofits or your networks or your other people that are joining with you to do that, that's an equally fulfilled dharma.
Hmm.
So there is no comparison necessary between the scope of one person's dharma compared with the scope of another person's dharma. Dharma is so personal. It's like who we are as we're falling asleep. That's how personal and intimate it is. Who we are as lovers. That's how intimate it is. So you can't compare it. Oh, I should be doing more. I should be doing more if my heart, if my soul force, if my broad intelligence is demanding that there's more for me to embody and radiate and do and be.
And
That's what dharma.
releasing ourselves just to live that fire and to not
Yeah.
worry about what it is, that's when it comes in, right? And so,
Yes.
wow, you are speaking so beautifully about this participation between the Capricorn feminine and the Leo feminine. Because on
Yes.
one side, it's like, this seems so simple, it seems so obvious. Anytime we say that, that is the core wisdom. We don't
Yes.
have to force something on somebody because it's just right. And
Yes.
this is a high octave of that Capricorn feminine energy, that wisdom. And then we come into following self, following calling, and just opening up to it.
Yes.
You talked earlier, Adam, about what the essence of air is for you. Would you talk about the fire, the Leo fire?
Yeah. Um. Okay. So, fire or Leo fire, which
Sorry, fire in general. I just said Leo fire for those who don't know out here that Leo is a fire
oh,
sign.
cool, cool, cool. Yeah, fire. So for me, fire is what allows life to initiate, to become not excitable, like to happen, to have legs. In other words, it's a primordial force, just like all the elements are primordial forces. But fire is the inception. It's the inception of life, and the ancient tantrics and some of the Taoist and even some of the Egyptian alchemy stuff really speaks quite powerfully. I mean, the language is sometimes hard for me to modern person, but they all kind of speak to this fire as this unfathomable um, excitation that arises out of nothing.
Hmm.
That's like what the element of fire for me is the start is. Now we can translate that or convert that down to something more accessible and talk about fire here as the fire of our personal inspiration, fire as representative or signifying of our spiritual nature, fire as because the elemental fire can never be extinguished. It's not like it needs wood to burn. That's not how the word fire is in all the alchemical traditions. Fire is pre-existing, unextinguishable, inextinguishable. It arises because it's part of the nature of universal fabric of reality. It doesn't arise because it has a proper tinder and enough flame and everything. Fire is primordial,
Mhm.
as the I think one of the Eastern traditions say, never born, never dying, kind of thing. And so for me, that's what fire is. Now Leo is, I love Leo because it's fixed fire. That means this ephemeral quality that I hope is coming across in how I'm describing my view of fire anyway, now becomes fixed, becomes almost reliable,
Mm.
becomes consistent. So, and for me, this is how personally, Brett, I contextualize or I house the light qualities and the shadow qualities of personality level Leo, which is always needs center stage, selfish, narcissistic as the shadow quality. And the light quality is very charismatic, very filled with life and positivity and creative imagination and play and fun and um, very committed to personal advancement. You know, so at that level, those light shadow of our personality, I do see those all the qualities that are written about by most of our colleagues in books and workshops and whatever. I see all of that housed, though, contained within this primordial idea of fire, and when that primordial force, never born, never dying, inspiration, that which causes life to initiate itself to start happening, is becomes available, reliable.
Mm.
Leo, becomes like, oh wow, all I need to do is go into that. And then we have a word we call self-love. So it's very much a Leo, um, a Leo, um, um, uh, yeah, it's a Leo quality. It's a Leo personality trait. Even some people just are much better are kind of good with themselves, even if they screw up royally. They have a lot of self-acceptance, self-love, self-forgiveness. Other people, that's very, very difficult lesson to learn.
Right.
Very difficult,
Yeah,
you know?
this screaming inner critic that would keep us from just creatively manifesting. But it's not about destroying that voice, it's about cultivating our relationship to it so we can transition it from foe to friend, right?
Yes.
So there's this thing I say about the fixed signs is that they serve this very imperative quest of fix yourself to fix the world. And so as
Oh,
we
that's great.
own that self-love, we are giving true core love. So there's a couple of things because we're running out of time. We didn't even really get all astrological. And where I think a lot of people watching this video are in this 13 flower journey, that's probably a good service actually. And I would love to have you back on a little bit further along if that interests you.
I would love it. I
All
would love
right.
it. Yeah,
Yeah, I
absolutely.
mean, well, I'll just leave the million compliments to myself right now.
I
So,
feel
all right. So speaking about relationship now, this 2015 year is so key for this. Not
mm,
only do we have the North Node in Libra and that forward direction into relationship, but for
mhm.
the first time since 1996, three exact longitudinal conjunctions between Venus and Mars, which in so many ways are the yin and the yang. I've been talking about that as an opportunity to rewrite our relationship to relationship itself. And this is some of the
Love.
core teaching of you and Gary Caton, who will be the next guest during the course of this thing.
Oh,
And
great.
yeah, would you just tell us about the online class that's coming up here? It's a couple
Yeah,
weeks.
it's on August 27th, so it's 9 days from today, August 27th in the evening Eastern time. There's a website where you can register. It's skyastrologyconference.com where you can register. It's $20. It's an hour and a half. It's myself, Gary Caton, and Julene Packer, who's the head of the whole IAA 4-year diploma school for astrology. And the three of us created something this past February called the Sky Astrology Conference, where we held a 4-day immersive conference. We chose the Bahamas because of good viewing conditions, where we looked at the phases of Venus, the phases of Mars, and then the phases of Venus and Mars together as their own synod, their own cycle itself. This and what celebrated that moment was the Venus Mars conjunction, the first of these three. The second will be on September 1st. We're holding this webinar on the 27th to give people a couple days in because of my schedule needs. And what we're going to be describing is the nakshatra position of the conjunctions. That Julene Packer is an expert in Vedic astrology, Hindu astrology. I'm going to be describing the phases of Venus and the phases of Mars, respectively, with the Sun during this conjunction. So where is Venus in her archetypal process? Where is Mars in his when the two of them are meeting up? And then Gary's going to speak about that actual alignment between Venus and Mars. So we'll have the archetypal context, we'll have the star background, the nakshatras, and Gary's, and we'll have the Venus-Mars phase itself. And Gary's been doing some really sky-breaking work in really discovering some of these new this cycle in a way that no one, to my knowledge, has ever worked with before.
Yeah, he is opening some incredible doors. I mean, I saw him speak. I went and spoke at the Shamanic Astrology conference, and he spoke there. You know, and that whole thing, like, I got to speak before my teacher, Daniel, whatever. I was, like, opening for the dude, and then the opening act before me was like, whoa, wait, what? He changed my life, like, in a moment. And then, like, bringing that in through my thing instead of falling into the envy or whatever. But I've opened a study with him since then, and he's just become a dear brother and mentor. And his research into this cycle is really important, I feel, for us to know more about how Venus is evolving through her dance, how Mars is evolving through his, and therefore the yin and the yang, and the celebration of the two. So I'm going to bring one more piece in about relationship this year, is that Juno and Jupiter make conjunction this year. And that's the first time since 2009. It won't happen until 2023. 2009 was actually the last 3 Friday the 13th year like we have this year. And their conjunction was May 16th at 14 degrees 46 minutes Leo.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the very same place. I mean, 14 degrees 55 minutes Leo is the second Venus-Mars conjunction on August 31st, right? And that Lammas point of the zodiac, the place of abundance and harvest. And they started Venus and Mars anyway on February 21st in the very early degrees of Aries, new beginnings. And so we see this fire sign thing happening, and as Adam and Gary will show us, I imagine, in this presentation, which, by the way, $20, folks, like, get on that. Absolutely. That's a beautiful sharing, and I value that so much. I can't wait for that. But Venus and Mars, their first conjunction was like this. This next one on August 31st, longitudinally aligned, but latitudinally, which you only see when you watch the sky, really, like this. And then they come back together. And so that story that they're bringing to us and helping us enter into is so beautiful. I can't wait to speak with you more about that, Adam. But since we're running out of time here, there's one more thing I was hoping that you could share with us. Because, you know, this process that we'll be going through in this group, it is a process of release and return. And there is a calling to enter that shadow, not to run from it, to dive through the wave to find the peaceful waters on the other side. And oftentimes, you know, Chiron can be a guide for us in these kinds of processes. And this is another book that you've written about Chiron and the heart. And I haven't read that yet. I actually ordered my copy last night. But I feel that that would be a good place for us to leave off, is why? Why heal when sometimes it can be so painful?
Yeah. So the book is called Chiron, The Wisdom of a Deeply Open Heart. It's a book, again, that arose out of a client experience. You can't visually see Chiron, so there was no night sky observation that's possible. But for me, that's where the book really rose. A lot of work. Plus, I have Chiron natally prominent for me. I have Chiron very tight conjunction to my North Node. So it's a big part of my dharma in this life and what I meant to embody and put forward. So it's a beautiful question that gets right to the heart of the matter, Brett, when you say, why? There's 2 reasons why a person would choose to go into the shadow, their own shadow self, a person would choose to heal. One, because the person doesn't have a sufficient relationship with their pain. In other words, that old saying, the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Mm.
When something's hurting emotionally, physically, energetically, even spiritually, psychically, when something's hurting, I'm going to want to do something about it because I don't want to hurt. I don't want to be uncomfortable. So that's the first reason why a human being would want to go into the shadow, to get to the source, the actual root of the discord. The Buddhists call it the word suffering, the pain, the hurt, the sorrow, the negative emotions. But the second reason that other people choose to go into it, not because it's painful, but because in their truth, they want to experience more of who they are while alive in this incarnation. So rather than being motivated by the pain of suffering and emotional distraught or physical pain, like, injuries that have me in bed for 3 years, right? Or being depressed, like, clinically depressed for many, many years. That's a form of pain. Okay, so that's the first reason. Again, the second reason is because I want to experience more of who I am, and I've come to learn. And I'm speaking generically here about this second type of person. Is I know that the root of where I'm keeping more of me kind of under the radar or suppressed is in the shadow. Actively go there, rather than wait for another, relationship breakup or another physical injury, or another dear friend dying all of a sudden and not having them in my life anymore, or losing a bunch of my finances. I'm not going to wait for that. I want to proactively go there and start looking for it.
Absolutely, right. Things happen for us instead of to us when we summon our evolution instead of just surrender to the things that come in. They both work. They're both genius here in the Earth game, but why not intentionally evolve and participate with this calling here?
Yes, and there's a timing for these things. There's a natural timing. I can want all I want to go to this next level of my consciousness, but if I'm not cellularly wired to open that door until another 5 years, well, great. Then I just found that out. I don't have to go there. I can focus my attention on other things, and it will show up later if I'm still committed to it. Right. So the Chiron work is really about going from the feeling of the experience, or the unconscious belief, not the conscious, but the unconscious belief of sort of being a victim to my condition, into becoming empowered, not through a bunch of Superman or Superwoman heroics, but being willing to stay wide-eyed and open-hearted to the vulnerability of hurting, and out of that is born a flower of courage and strength, inner strength. So I call it's from moving from the wound into the medicine.
What a beautiful expression, the flower of courage. I mean, that says so much about what we're talking about here. So clearly, folks, you and I have a lot of Adam Gainsburg reading to do. You can find the Venus book and the Chiron book and other writings of Adam's. You can find meditation CDs at his beautiful website, soulsign.com. Skyastrology.com is the place to go to find this.
Sky Astrology Conference.
Sorry, skyastrologyconference.com is the place to go to find about this $20 sharing that's coming up. Get on that, seriously. And as far as participating with this 13th flower Venus synodic cycle sharing, which is free, is a gift. It'll feature many interviews like this and a lot of teachings and music from Marya Stark and others, and art. You can subscribe to the YouTube playlist that this will be posted on, or go to my website, morethan.astrology.com, scroll down a little bit past my storytelling podcast episodes, and you will see a 13th flower section. There's a public Facebook group you can join. There's a YouTube playlist you can subscribe to, and a SoundCloud playlist to subscribe to for the audio sharings. There's one more thing I wanted to say, Adam, before we close, if you have 2 minutes. And it's just to look at this chart here, because in this fix yourself to fix the world, there's heal yourself to heal the world.
Yeah.
And so many people in my community, because this is what we do, are in deep healing processes right now. And I'm
Oh
seeing
yeah.
this in men and women alike, of course, but it really resonates when I started looking into this cycle, and to see that that last Scorpio exterior conjunction, which, plot spoiler here, but that is the death and rebirth moment of Inanna in the great story that we will be journeying into, the last time in Scorpio, right? Which is kind of where you want to have a death and rebirth, but during Venus's underworld passage in Scorpio, when she was gone, when she was furthest from the earth, we lost 3 women in our community here,
Yes.
who all transitioned, and all in the water. And when I look back to this cycle, when she's doing that exterior conjunction in Scorpio, we bring in like the burning times and some of the other inquisitions, and just pretty heavy times on Earth. And I have some dear friends and some clients as well who are literally expressing physical sores, like burn marks, and dreaming about these burning times and whatever. And it really feels like, in a sense, this is part of our archetypal karma that we are purging now, to bring ourselves into more beautiful and trusting and intimate, loving relationship. So seeing how the masculine can support the feminine in this quest, how they can really do it together, is so important to me. And when we look into a lot of the astrological alignments, especially Uranus revolution and Eris, goddess of discord, coming together in this cycle for the first time since 1927, which was when that Scorpio thing first began. And it's just ending. So I look forward to sharing so much more. And Adam, thank you so much. I really hope we can get you back on here to share more. And when we get into the astrological stuff, I look forward to also showing off your incredible software, which for you astrologers out there, pick up Sky Engine. It's part of Intrepid software, and it allows you to do all of these phases of Venus. That is some of Adam's work, not only from Adam's standpoint, but from the Shamanic Astrology, from Gary Caton's Heroic Journey vision, from a traditional vision. It's very easy to play with. And then the software itself, it is like the most incredible software for actually seeing how the planets move. You can just animate the thing real time, and it's almost like zooming out and watching the solar system. So I'll be showing off that software a lot during the course of this thing, because I love having that. And where can astrologers find your software if they're interested, Adam?
Yeah, the software is at intrepidastrologysoftware.com.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again. We didn't even get to unfold so much of the astrological stuff we were talking about before we hit record, but I think that's wonderful for where we are in this journey right now, and hopefully I can bring you back in to go into those places sometime down the road. All right, brother, from my heart to yours, thank you so much. Love and planets. I will see you in space.
See you in space.
Down are surprised.